So if you had to say, my life is better in the US or my life is better in Germany, could you definitively say yes or no to either one of those?
What's on the pro and cons list that would make you move there when life is so much better?
Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. I am Donnie, and along with my wife Aubrey, we are two Americans currently living in Germany with our baby, sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. A couple of years ago, I was chatting with a couple of Germans, and after explaining our story about moving to Germany from the US, they asked me a question. And your lives are better over here, right? Now, we've actually gotten this quite often, and my answer has varied over time as our reasons for living in Germany has changed over the last 5 years. I actually also applied for German citizenship recently, still waiting on finding out if we are approved or not, which was something I never considered I would do when we first moved here. So now I'm looking more seriously at the question of, is my life better here than it was there? However, to get a fuller picture on this question of where life is better, I thought it would be a good idea to get a different perspective, namely a perspective of someone who is in the exact opposite position of me, a German who moved to the US who has also now applied for American citizenship. Many of you are already familiar with my guest because of her amazing YouTube channel, Feli from Germany. Yes, it's Feli. So why did we essentially swap places? Do we both want to stay where we are? And as two people who have lived extended periods of time in either country, the biggest question for today, do we agree on where life is really better? And that's exactly what Feli and I'm going to talk about today in my video. Is life wirklich schöner, or should I have left sooner? When we're evaluating if our lives are better in one place or another, it is really important to understand where we are coming from, because this is a very subjective question and a lot depends on personal life experiences. I often say in my videos that we are from a southern US state called Oklahoma and now live in the southwestern German state of Rheinland-Pfalz, and a lot of what I talk about on my channel is going to be specific to these two places. Experiences Feli has had in Ohio won't necessarily be experiences that I had in Oklahoma, or experiences I've had in Rheinland-Pfalz won't be the same she had in Bavaria. Because of this, I think it is a good idea to get an idea of where we came from and why we are where we are. Can you kind of give like a brief reason why you did move to the US?
I really just kind of went here because I was in Germany. I was 22. I was at the end of my bachelor degree. And so I looked into where I could do a study abroad, and I was like, you know what? I kind of want to do the American college life for like one last hurrah before my time in university was over. My program specifically had an exchange program with the University of Cincinnati, but with the electronic media department, which they had like an audio production studio, live TV studio, all these cool cameras, like all the stuff that German universities just don't have money for. Like, it was so cool. But as an exchange student, you get to just go to the university and not really pay the American tuition. You pay tuition to your home university, which in Germany was like a couple hundred a semester. So yeah, I did that. It was just supposed to be one semester. And then I just kind of fell in love with it. I had to go back home to Germany afterwards because the US doesn't just let you stay here. So I was back in Germany for 8 months after that, but I was looking heavily to find a way to come back to the US. The first way that I found was an unpaid internship. And then I was able to get my master's at the University of Cincinnati in German studies with like a full scholarship. And then I was lucky enough to win the green card lottery. So long story short, I never really planned on staying here for it's gonna be 8 years. The first 2 years were kind of on and off, but then like 6 years permanently. I also never had that moment where I brought all my stuff over here. I came with like 2 suitcases at the beginning.
What's really funny though, listening to your story, is your story and my story are the exact same. So I came here, I went to Bonn on a study abroad program when I was in college and just loved it. I lived with the German family and everything. My wife and I got married pretty quickly after we graduated, and I asked her like, hey, would you ever be willing to move to Germany? She's like, what the heck, yeah. And so we moved here and we're like, let's just go do 1 year. Let's just see what it is, and we'll just play it by ear. We only brought like 2 bags as well each, and then we fell in love with it even more. Now we've had a baby here, and now we've stayed here for 5 years, and now we're getting German citizenship. Whenever people ask that question, like, oh, your lives are better here, to me, I have kind of felt like there's a little bit of an assumption of like, you moved here to better your life. For us personally, that was never even a thought. I think for us, like the lives we were living in the US that we had no problems with, we didn't
Yeah.
think, oh, we should go see Germany to see if our lives are better there. For us, it was more of just kind of like a, wouldn't it be fun to go live in Germany? Of course, there are people that do move to either country looking to better their lives. Maybe they're coming from different countries than these two where there are certain difficulties they are escaping, or maybe they come from different socioeconomic statuses in the same countries that we came from. In a way, I could say that Feli and I seem to be very lucky and blessed in that we had good lives in both countries and didn't have obvious reasons that we felt that we needed to try and seek better lives. But that doesn't necessarily mean that because someone didn't leave their country to better their lives, that their lives aren't better because of the move. So the question remains, are our lives better in Germany or the US? If we look at data of nations that think their nation is the best, we see that only 5% of Germans think their nation is the best in the world compared to 41% of Americans who do. The US, as we all know, is extremely patriotic. One of the culture shocks we experienced living in Germany was actually the lack of in-your-face patriotism that we were used to seeing. In a way, because of the lack of patriotism that you see and experience in Germany, I was initially taken a bit by surprise when I was first asked by a German, your life is better here, right? In a way, this phrasing of this question where they are assuming the answer is yes is perhaps what I would expect to hear more in the US, where we are kind of taught that America is the greatest country on earth. So this was one thing that I wanted to find out from Feli. Does she get the same type of question and assumption from Americans that I get from Germans?
I think I get it more from Germans too, like in real life. Like I remember like whenever I'm in Germany, whenever especially I meet new people, and then like the topic comes up, like, I live in the US usually, and then they usually ask, why? Why would you do that? Is like, what are your, and then they kind of want to hear like the rational arguments, like what's on the pro and cons list that would make you move there when life is so much better here in Germany, kind of. That's not everyone, but there's definitely a lot of educated Germans out there that, they know about all the struggles in the US with like healthcare and education and poverty and gun violence and all of that. And so they're just like, why would anyone ever do that?
I wonder if some Americans maybe do wonder if you think your life is better there or not, but just based off of like maybe kind of cultural norms in terms of how Germans are a little bit more are willing to be asked those kind of difficult questions or be a little bit more direct sometimes, and Americans sometimes like to beat around the bush. Is that a reason why maybe you haven't gotten that as well versus why I've gotten it so many more times or something?
It's not like I haven't gotten it. It's just, I don't think it's like as common here. I feel like it's maybe just a little bit less judgmental in the US. Yeah, I feel like Germans just sometimes feel like they're entitled to judging other people's life decisions. Especially when someone tells another German, like, hey, I got a new job. Sometimes instead of just being happy for them, they'll like ask all these critical questions first in order to kind of put into a category like, should I be happy for you? Or is this maybe a bad decision? And I should be a good friend and tell you that this is a bad decision. Living there and growing up there, I sometimes didn't feel like I had the freedom to just do whatever I wanted if it didn't make sense on paper. Germans are just totally ready to judge your life decision of whether moving to the US or moving to Germany was the right thing. Whereas I think Americans, it's not common here to judge that for other people. Like you can be curious and ask like, oh, what were your reasons? But I don't think they're really trying to like evaluate it for you.
So perhaps it is less a question of if Germans ask this because of their secret hidden patriotism being greater than Americans, and more of a difference in cultural and social norms. Germans may not see their country as the best, but at least better than the US. And presumably this is more acceptable to say in conversation in Germany, where Germans tend to be more direct, unlike in the US, where this wouldn't be acceptable to say in small talk and fear of offending the other party. And this difference in social norms and mentalities, surprisingly, is one of the big things that affects our experience living in another country that can affect where we feel like our lives are better. When you said like you were there in college and there were some things that you fell in love with in the US. Like what were some of those things that you fell in love with that made you think you wanted to stay in the US?
I think it was a lot the mentality, just like the positive thinking and like the way that people were kind of supporting me in certain things that I did or that I told them about, the way that people were just like happy for me, encouraging me to do new things. I started my YouTube channel, which I've said this before, but I don't think that I would have ever done that if I had stayed in Germany, because I feel like Germans are just a little bit more judgmental about that kind of stuff. At least that's my experience. And I don't think I would have had the guts to just start a YouTube channel and tell my friends about it and just hear their reactions. Here in the US, everyone was just like, oh my God, you're doing a YouTube channel? That's so cool. And everyone just supported me so much, even more than I wanted at the beginning. I had friends that just told their whole families about it. They were like, and I only had like 2 videos out, and I knew that they kind of sucked at the time. And I was like, yeah, please don't tell anyone too much until I've gotten a little bit better. But they were just so supportive and excited that I think that really gave me that push to feel good about taking this step, basically. And I know that a lot of Germans think that Americans are shallow or fake. And I used to think that too, because I had been to the US a few times before I went there for a longer period of time. But then during that semester, there was like after a few weeks, I kind of like cracked this code of my brain just suddenly seemed to understand the like fakeness, quote unquote. And I was like able to kind of decipher it and understand that it's just part of the cultural differences, that like certain messages are going to be packaged differently in this country. And you just have to kind of be able to read the subtext. But it's the same in Germany. If you didn't grow up there, you need to learn that too. Even though we think we're so direct, we are very direct in Germany. But if you're not from there, that can come across as rude sometimes. And as a foreigner, you have to kind of learn that too, that sometimes, even though it comes across as rude, it's really not.
We've also experienced big differences in our day-to-day interactions with Germans versus Americans. Honestly, I really don't think it is any secret to Germans that they love to complain as if it is a national sport. Germans do generally tend to be a little more pessimistic and judgmental in our experiences as well. I've had comments on videos where Germans have told me I've officially Germanized and am ready for my German passport when I have complained about the weather or bureaucracy. Maybe Germans would call it realistic or just being honest, but tomato tomato. But I will admit, it can honestly sometimes be a little exhausting when everybody around you focuses on the negative things going on in the world or in their own personal situations, whereas Americans typically tend to look for the silver linings and the things they can be positive about. Interestingly, the US barely outranks Germany in terms of happiness, despite giving the impression they might be happier. But if I look at data of who are, for example, the most optimistic about the future of the world, Americans have a significantly more positive outlook than Germans. So it isn't so much that Americans are actually generally happier than Germans, but just our social norms and how we view the world is perhaps different. But given our personalities and what we are used to, we personally prefer the American rose-colored glasses generally, and we find it a bit of a drawback to life in Germany, in particular in those gray, sunless, rainy winters when we need a shred of hope and we can't find it in the general personality of the people around us at times. But Americans and Germans also have different mentalities when it comes to a lot of other stuff that also affect our view on our lives in either country. For example, our mentalities towards convenience.
And this sounds kind of bad, but it's like the convenience here. I definitely enjoyed not really having to plan everything out all the time with like, when do you get your groceries? Especially in Bavaria, stores close very early. Everything is closed on Sundays. I mean, this is like my particular experience with being from Munich, which is a big city, and then being in Cincinnati, which is like a mid-sized city where everything's pretty relaxed. You can just drive places here without thinking about it, and there's always going to be parking. Always. And you don't have to stress about it. It's just very relaxed. In Munich, if you want to go somewhere, you have to make sure that you plan enough time for public transportation and delays. Then if you want to drive somewhere, you better plan a half hour to find parking, and you better scout everything on Google Maps or Google Street View beforehand to see where you could possibly park. So I think just like the convenience, and then obviously everything was open so late here. After COVID, it kind of changed, but like before COVID, most grocery stores were open at least until 1 a.m. or 24 hours. And I just like the first time that I walked into a Kroger at like midnight and I bought vegetables, I was like, this is weird. This feels wrong.
Yeah, that's what you say. It sounds bad, the convenience. And I think that's like, oh man, I don't know. From an American like me living in Germany, I'm like, I don't think that sounds bad at all. That sounds like a dream. I miss that kind of stuff.
I think it sometimes can sound lazy almost, or like, yeah, that's not a real reason. Yeah, but I think it just played a little role in that whole why I enjoyed my life here so much, because it was just like so much fun.
There's little funny things that affect your overall experience on where you prefer to live that for other people wouldn't be so critical perhaps. Things like the convenience of being able to buy groceries on Sunday. But it is more than just Sundays and everything being closed. America has drive-through banks. Things generally stay open later. Things are handled online much more often. Card payments are more widely accepted. It's these little things that are minor and we don't really feel like we miss too much, but we still, kind of prefer the convenience. And sure, maybe these are trivial matters compared to much greater issues that may have a bigger impact on your experiences living in either country.
But of course, I'm saying that from a very privileged position. At that time, I didn't have to struggle with anything like healthcare debt, or I was lucky enough that I didn't have to go into debt to even attend college. I didn't really have to deal with any of the negative aspects that life in the US can also bring with you. I think the only negative aspect at the very beginning that I encountered was gun violence, which that was definitely surprising to me because I came here with the attitude that, of course, we all know in Germany that gun violence is a problem in the US, but I didn't really think that it would affect me. Like I thought that, obviously in the media, they report about the incidents, but it's not like the incidents happen at every single street corner. Like if I stay in safe areas and with good people and I don't get involved in like weird drug deals or something like that, I'll be fine. Turns out, nope, it's at least in Cincinnati, way more prevalent than I thought. And I heard a lot of gunshots my first semester, and there was active shooter situations, I think twice my first semester on campus. I was also dating someone at the time, and his roommate was a pizza delivery driver, and he also had, like, during the first month or so of me being here, this roommate was robbed at gunpoint.
So grocery stores being open on Sunday or not having the fear of being robbed at gunpoint. Since we apparently can't have both pros in one country, these are the types of factors that don't carry similar weight, obviously. To be fair, Germany has recently had a few tragic violent events happen that have to a small degree shaken our sense of safety here, but it's nothing compared to violent events that have happened in the US. Overall, I can definitely say that for the most part, we do feel safer in Germany. There's an old story that goes something like, there are two young fish swimming along who happen to meet an older fish. The older fish nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" The two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and asks, "What the heck is water?" When we grew up in the US, that was our environment we grew up in, and that's all we knew. It wasn't until we jumped out of our fishbowl, if you will, and realized that what we were living in was very different from what was outside of that fishbowl. Where we felt comfortable before because that's all we knew, we now have been outside of it and see it a little differently. No, you will not be in perilous danger from violence in most of the US, and we still feel very safe in the US, and that may just be based on what we personally have or maybe haven't experienced over there. But obviously, safety and the feeling of safety is an important factor when considering where life might be better. But unlike these types of factors that seems to have a clear difference in weight, it isn't always really so black and white.
So you talk about a lot of the social aspects or the mentality of the country were things that you fell in love with, is what I'm hearing. And then you hear a lot about like shootings and the healthcare system and student loan debt. So nice people and friendliness and an open mentality outweigh all of those massive cons to make you want to stay in the US?
I think that it always depends on your individual situation. So in my case, I don't have any children where I have to worry about them going to a public school and maybe being in danger or something like that. I haven't had to deliver a child where I had to pay however many tens of thousands of dollars for the hospital bill. I don't have student loans that I have to pay back. So I think my individual situation for like the life that I am living right now, I'm lucky enough that these negative aspects don't really affect me personally. I think if they did, I probably would move back to Germany. And I know for a fact that whenever I have a child, which I want to have a child at some point, I will not deliver it in the US for different reasons. So that's like the one aspect of my life where I have kind of thought it through, where like I know for sure that whenever that happens, I'm going to be in Germany for that time. I'm going to be in Germany to deliver it, also to have my family around. I mean, that's also like one of these pros and cons that people sometimes forget about. It's, friends and family from back in the day.
That's one of the biggest things for us right now. Now we have a baby. We actually have another baby on the way. And all of our family are thousands of miles away and all of our friends.
Yeah.
And so Of
Yeah.
course, we've built a community here as well, but that's still not your family. And so that's always one of those tricky things where sometimes I like debate in my own head. It's like, well, am I going to live somewhere simply because my family has chosen to live in such and such place? Or am I going to, forge my own path? Or am I going to say, like, yeah, but family, like that connection is so important that I'm willing to kind of deal with these other cons or lose some of the pros over here to be near those connections.
Yeah, that's honestly a big reason as to why my boyfriend and I are planning on moving to Germany for at least a year. But it could be permanent. I don't know.
Hmm.
We'll see how it goes. Um, and that's partly that I've missed so many birthday parties. I've missed so many big events over the last 8 years. Where like at the beginning in my early 20s, I didn't care about it as much because I had been there my whole life. So like it didn't really hurt me that much to not be there for those things for like a year or two. But after a few years, it's kind of like, wow, I've missed the birth of several family members, and I only get to see them like twice a year. And so every time I see them, they're like so much bigger, so much bigger. So many just like little events, like grilling out in the summer, like just spontaneously meeting up with friends at a beer garden. That is definitely a big factor.
Is life better when you live thousands of miles away from your family and friends you've had your whole life? Maybe for some of you, you would be able to answer that immediately with a resounding but that's not really the case for us. It's especially become difficult now that we have children who see grandparents and cousins once a year, twice a year if we're lucky. There's just a certain sense of feeling at home that we don't have anymore. But how can we weigh that against other pros and cons? There are some things that are quantifiable like crime rates, school rankings, or cost of living, but there are other things that are purely emotional, and placing a value on that to compare to something with real values is a very difficult task. But then I guess the question becomes, do we have to choose just one?
So I'm actually very excited. I just filed my application for American citizenship yesterday. I do get a lot of comments of, first of all, oh my God, yes, you want to become an American. You love it here so much that you just want that like label, I guess. Or I also get the opposite comments of, oh, this is a terrible idea. The US is falling apart. Why would you want to become an American now? And I think this mostly comes from people who've never had to deal with like immigration regulations and stuff like that. For me, it's really not so much an emotional decision. I mean, it's definitely going to be emotional too in a way. And that's why it was very important for me not to give up my German citizenship, because that would have been very emotional for me. I would never give up my German citizenship.
In June of 2024, the German laws for citizenship were changed so that, among other changes, everybody is now allowed to hold multiple nationalities. Unlike in the past, only few exceptions were made to the rule that if you wanted German citizenship, you had to give up all others first. But it isn't just foreigners living in Germany that get to benefit from these new laws. Germans themselves benefit from this specific part of the law change. For example, Feli would have previously been kept from being allowed to gain American citizenship without first giving up her German citizenship because the German law didn't allow her to have both. But the assumption we get a lot when I tell people we have applied for German citizenship is something in the neighborhood of, wow, your life really must be better here if you're looking to get German citizenship. Part of that is because the thought is with getting German citizenship, we would be able to stay in Germany forever. And to be honest, since we didn't necessarily move here initially for anything more than a one-year adventure that turned into many years, German citizenship was never a goal previously. However, as we happened to be here right around the time that Germany made it plausible we could get it, we started asking ourselves, why not? However, besides just the perfect timing of being here during the change in laws that we could benefit from, as we stayed and as I invested more and more time into the country, culture, and language, I started to build a strong connection to Germany that it then became a strong desire to have German citizenship. German citizenship is a way to keep me connected to the place that I have invested so much time and effort into, so there definitely is an emotional element to it for me. But there is also an element of practicality.
Having dual citizenship, I think for me is just going to be more a question of practicality. Because we are planning on moving to Germany. I do have a green card right now, but unfortunately the green card is connected to certain visa requirements. And so if you leave the US for a longer period of time, you usually lose your green card. And then, of course, I could probably get a green card through marriage or something like that in the future. But then you have to go through the whole process again. And it just makes things very complicated, especially with like work permits and having a business in the US and stuff like that. Like you can't just make money if you don't have a work permit. So it's mostly just that it would open me the door of being able for both Germany and the US just come and go as I like, move back and forth as I like, and having like all the freedoms, including being able to, have a business, being able to work, and all of that without having to struggle with the whole immigration process again.
Yes, on top of the emotional connection I feel for Germany now, like Feli said, there is an element of practicality to getting German citizenship. For the rest of our lives, we will be able to come and go as we please, whether that means for travel or for living, and we'll never have to worry about how we will get a visa again. With an EU passport, we also would have the door open to any country in the EU. Our children will also forever benefit from this and will be able to freely choose where they want to live because we went through the process now. But like Feli, our lives haven't been so radically changed for the better in Germany that we would have ever given up our American passports previously just to gain German citizenship, and we aren't getting it just because we want a ticket to stay in Germany forever. So if you had to say, my life is better in the US or my life is better in Germany, could you definitively say yes or no to either one of those?
Absolutely not. I mean, both the US and Germany have pros and cons. And I think that's kind of like the beautiful part about being someone who moved abroad, but also it's kind of like the negative aspect of it, because it's almost like you're never going to be fully at home somewhere anymore, because now you have two homes, which is amazing. But you also like, wherever you live, you're always going to miss the other home, and you're always going to miss certain aspects about the other place, I think. And that's kind of what it's like with answering this question too. Is life better anywhere? I think, again, it depends on your specific life situation. So it's just such a nuanced topic, I would say, that I think everyone has to decide that for themselves. For me, in my early to mid to late 20s, it felt like my life was not better, but it just felt right for me to be here where I am in the US. But that was mainly just because I didn't really have to deal with some of the negative aspects that the US brings. And some of the negative aspects I just accepted. So it was never like a full-on rational decision. It was more of an emotional decision in a way. I think if I had to break it down on paper, it probably never really made sense for me to move here, but it just felt really, really good.
Yeah. I think, one thing that you said is something that we joke about all the time, is that I think we've gained a lot from moving to Germany and moving just abroad in general, but also in many ways it's kind of ruined us for the rest of our lives because of that exact thing of like, man, there's so many things that we miss about the US here, but we know as soon as we move to the US, we're going to love some of those aspects, but we're going to miss so much of what we can get in Germany. And it's like, no matter what, we're going to be disappointed now. And so we don't know, like, how do we move forward at this point?
Yeah, pretty much. Kind of ruins you in a way, but I mean, mostly I think it widens your horizons, hopefully.
Yeah. At the end of the day, living in either country is accepting the pros and cons, as we have found many of both in either country. My purpose with this video isn't to convince you life is better either in the US or Germany, or that life couldn't be better in either. For some people, their lives may truly be improved by moving to one or the other. For me personally, we are very privileged that we haven't experienced anything so bad or so good in either country at this point that I feel strongly either way for the most part. More than anything, I feel strongly about those that speak to me assuming that my life is better in one place. I honestly don't understand why when someone meets you, they would feel the need to put down where you come from and assume where they are from is better and then feel the need to tell you that. But let me know your thoughts. Where are you from? Where have you lived? And what pros and cons have you noticed in those places? To see who made it this far into the video, the random question of the week is, do you drink your coffee black? Or what do you do to doctor it up? Thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you in my next video. Lack of patriotism that you... Baby crying. But I'll admit, there can honestly be some times with... But I'll admit, there honestly can be some times with it being... But I will admit, it can honestly